the book of Psalms is not a hymn book, but rather each psalm has been placed exactly where it is in order to tell the story of David and of the greater David to come. Now, in book 1, we watch the Davidic king battle opposition and then trust God for salvation. That opposition is going to continue in book 2, but we will watch God deliver his messianic king and bring his kingdom over all nations. Now, the structure of book 2 is tied to book 3. And here in book 2, we're introduced to a couple of new authors. We got the sons of Korah in 42 to 49 and Asaph in 50. And these guys, they're going to come back in book 3. And you'll notice there's kind of a chiastic thing going on here, isn't there? Where the outer frame, we got the Psalms of Korah, and you go in one, and we got the Psalms of Asaph. And then here at the center, we have our second Davidic collection in 51 to 71. But then at the end of each of these books, there's a critical royal psalm in 72 and 89. Let me show you a little diagram that's a little bit more clear than the whiteboard here behind me. Take a look at this. I can make it a little bit bigger. So here's the structure of books 2 and book 3. And you can see, like I said before, the outer frame are the sons of Korah, and then the inner frame is Asaph, and then at the center we have a Davidic collection. But then at the end of each of these books, 72 and 89, is a critical royal psalm featuring and focusing on the Davidic covenants. We'll take a look at those in a minute. Now, book 1 opened with 2 5+1 blocks. 5 laments, 1 praise. 5 laments, 1 praise. Book 2 is going to open with 2 3+1 blocks. 3 laments and a royal psalm. 3 Zion psalms and a wisdom psalm. All of which by the sons of Korah. And what's unique about these guys, the sons of Korah, is their consistent emphasis on Jerusalem and the temple in that city. They even emphasize Zion, the city of God, the temple of the great king, in the lament psalms as well. Let's take a look at those in Psalm 42, the opening psalm in book 2. The sons of Korah and their focus on Jerusalem. As the deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O my God. My soul thirsts for my God. When shall I come and appear before God? Now, where are these sons of Korah going to appear before God? Where's that going to take place? Well, they would go with the throng and lead them in the procession to the house of God. And then we have this refrain, which is repeated in both Psalms 42 and 43. Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God. And that refrain is going to be picked up in the last line of 42 and the last line of 43. And where's this hope going to come from? Well, God is going to shine out his light and his truth, and he's going to lead these sons of Korah and bring them to his holy hill, to the dwelling of God, the altar of God, which is his exceeding joy. Is that really a lament? It seems pretty great. Well, this emphasis on Zion, which is here hinted in the laments, is just going to be turned up to 11 here in the Zion Psalms, 46 to 48. They're great. Take a look at them. Sons of Korah, I would like to have met those guys. Those guys are pretty sweet. For God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in time of trouble. For there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. And this city, it is immovable. It is unshakable. The nations may rage against it. Think about Psalm 2. But the city of God is immovable. Look at Psalm 47. Why is this city immovable? Because it is the city of the great king who rules over all peoples of the earth from his throne there in Jerusalem. And then Psalm 48 is just a fantastic psalm. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, his holy mountain, Mount Zion, the city of the great God, great king. And you'll notice here that the nations no longer challenge Jerusalem. Rather, they exalt and they praise that city, for it is the joy of all the earth. You see, it is God's purpose to rule over the world through a son of David in Jerusalem. And the sons of Korah picture that happening here in 42 to 49. Now, Asaph, the one lonely Asaph psalm here in Psalm 50, reminds us that not only will God rule from Zion, but he will judge from Zion as well. This psalm opens by saying, "Out of Zion goes forth God. He shines forth from Jerusalem like a devouring fire to judge his people, the faithful and the wicked." So it's pretty intense, but we're going to look at this a little more detail in book 3 here in 73 to 83. But let's move now to the center of this two-book chiasm, the second Davidic collection, 51 to 71. Now, I wish that I could show you some beautiful chiasm where everything just lines up so perfectly, but I can't. The best I can do with these 21 psalms is to show you kind of an alternating pattern where we have a lament and then a wisdom psalm, and then another lament and a trust psalm, followed by one more lament and a praise collection, 65 to 68, and then finally 69 to 71, a final batch of Davidic laments. Now, you remember, in these laments, the Davidic king is going to be attacked by his enemies, but he's going to cry out to God for deliverance and hope and trust and be assured that God will save him. And you probably recognize the opening lament in this collection, Psalm 51, where David confesses his sin with Bathsheba. But I want you to notice two things about this psalm. The first one is in verse 10. Let's take a look. Okay, 51. Have mercy on me, O God. Blot out my transgressions. And then in verse 10, the first thing we want to notice, David here anticipates the need for the new covenant. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a right spirit within me. This sounds like Ezekiel 36 to me, where Ezekiel says that God will take out our stony heart and put in a heart of flesh and give a new spirit to us. It's number one. The second thing, it seems as if the editor of the book of Psalms has crafted and repurposed this psalm of David, a Davidic lament, in order to give hope to the exiles who themselves have sinned and are languishing under God's judgment. Look at the final verses of this psalm. Do good to Zion in your good pleasure and build up the walls of Jerusalem. Now I ask you, when were the walls of Jerusalem torn down? And by whom? The Babylonians in 586. So the editor is repurposing this Davidic lament to give hope to those in exile. And he's going to do the same thing, the same kind of repurposing in this two-psalm batch of wisdom psalms, 52 and 53, where in 53, David is going to pray that God would restore the fortunes of his people. And this little phrase is a stock phrase right out of the prophets, where it is used constantly for God returning the exiles from the nations, the enemy nations that have taken them away from the promised land. And the ultimate fate of those enemy nations is depicted for us in these praise psalms, 65 to 68. It's another batch of pretty cool psalms. Let's take a look at Psalm 67 and its focus on the enemy nations. What's going to happen to them? Well, the peoples, all the peoples will praise God, the God of Israel. Let the peoples praise you. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy. Why will they sing for joy? Because God judges the people with equity. And this word judge, it's used kind of, I guess you may say, negatively, convicting someone for their wrongdoing sometimes, but it's also oftentimes utilized as a synonym for rule and reign and administer justice. Look at the parallel line here, and guide the nations upon the earth. Now, the king is pictured in the following psalm, Psalm 68, as like the King of Glory entering in to Jerusalem to the sound of music and praise. Let's look at that in verse 24 of Psalm 68. Your procession is seen, O God, the procession of my God and my King into the sanctuary. the musicians are singing and they're doing their tambourines. And Israel is praising God. There's Benjamin, Judah's there, Zebulun's hanging out. So is Naphtali, but also the nations as well. Look at this. Because of your temple in Jerusalem, kings shall bear gifts to you. People from Egypt and Cush, all the kingdoms of the earth will sing to God. They'll sing praises to the Lord as they come and visit the king in Jerusalem. Now, Solomon, our buddy Solomon, he was praised by the nations as well. Think about 1 Kings chapter 10, where it says that the whole earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom and to give him gifts. I mean, think about the Queen of Sheba. Well, that is exactly what is described here in the royal psalm, Psalm 72, which is itself the pinnacle of our hopes for the Davidic kingdom in the entire Psalter. This is the high point. It is also written by Solomon. Only 2 psalms in the Psalter are written by Solomon, so that's pretty significant as well. And it is a prayer for the eternal reign of the Davidic king. Let's take a look at a few of those petitions for the king. Psalm 72. Give the king your justice, O God, your righteousness to the royal son. May he judge the people with righteousness, and your poor with justice. Defend the cause of the poor. Give deliverance to the needy. You see this again in 12 and 13. And because of his righteous rule, all of the nations will bless this king. All the nations will call him blessed. And they will bring gifts to him. Look at this. May the desert tribes bow down before him. May the kings of Tarshish and of the coastlands render him tribute. May the kings, and probably queens, of Sheba bring him gifts, and all nations serve him. And may his kingdom, his name, think about Genesis 12, endure forever, and his fame continue as long as the sun, till the moon be no more. I mean, what the psalmist is praying for here in Psalm 72 is that the kingdom of God would come on earth as it is in heaven. And that glorious kingdom was partially realized during the reign of Solomon, but how did his reign end? You see, we are going to explore the failure of the Davidic kingdom in Book 3 next.